Welcome to Podkey PPR, where draft hype meets a sharper second look. A lot of fantasy arguments sound persuasive until you ask one extra question: what exactly is being priced in here? Quarterback runs, injury discounts, contract bumps, breakout tight ends, all of it gets cleaner when you separate signal from adrenaline. The big structural shift is real. Superflex has pushed quarterbacks from a weight on the position afterthought into premium assets in Dynasty and plenty of startups, and that change has been building for more than a decade. Once the room treats quarterbacks as scarce, everything else starts moving around them. Wide receiver and running back prices don't just reflect those players anymore, they also reflect what drafters gave up chasing quarterback stability and ceiling. That helps explain why people are comfortable loading up on names like Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels, then still tacking on a cheaper quarterback such as Drake May in the middle rounds. It's less about collecting jerseys and more about insulating the most fragile position in Superflex. And there is a factual case for the stash strategy. Over the last 5 NFL seasons, an average of 43 quarterbacks per year started at least 4 games. That number matters because it says quarterback turnover is not a niche event. It is normal operating conditions. Where the analysis has to get stricter is when ADP becomes a substitute for evaluation. If someone calls Hurts an unnecessary risk, that's not automatically right, but the underlying point is fair. Price alone can't tell you whether the risk is justified. You still need tape, schedule, coaching changes, and role stability. The same goes for headline-driven moves. If a market pushes Patrick Mahomes down toward QB 13 because of injury or suspension noise, that could be a bargain, or it could be a warning that the market is pricing missed time correctly. The actionable part isn't buy the dip or fade the news, it's asking whether the drop reflects actual loss of fantasy output or just temporary panic. The appeal of cheaper rushing quarterbacks is straightforward and well supported. Rushing yards and rushing touchdowns create a second scoring channel, so a passer can be mediocre through the air and still matter in fantasy. The examples fit that logic. Kyler Murray's rushing profile has already shown top-tier value. Tyler Shuck, Malik Willis, and Shedeur Sanders were highlighted because each has posted enough rushing production in sample starts to create usable weekly insulation. The important caveat is that rushing creates floor only if the player actually keeps the job. That's where some late-round quarterback enthusiasm gets messy. The rushing math can be right, while the playing time assumption is flimsy. Pairing those quarterbacks with running backs in deep or superflex formats is an interesting idea because it captures a lot of team touchdown equity, but it also concentrates risk. If the offense disappoints, you've stacked the wrong kind of correlation, so it works best when the cost stays modest. This is probably where fantasy drafters most often confuse hope with analysis. Tank Dell's injury profile is severe: dislocated kneecap, torn ACL, MCL, LCL, meniscus, multiple surgeries, and a lost 2025 season. If his ADP rises anyway, that isn't proof the market knows something. It may just mean people are emotionally attached to the upside. Jonathan Brooks is a similar stress test. Re-tearing the same ACL after already coming back from a previous tear should force a pretty sober conversation about timeline, explosiveness, and team context. Instead, his price moved up even while he's set to miss 2025 and plays on a low-volume offense projected near the bottom of the league in scoring. That doesn't mean every injured player is a fade. It means buyers should be specific. What was repaired? How many surgeries? What does guaranteed money say about the team's commitment? Is the offense strong enough to absorb a slow recovery? Then there are the softer injury cases, like Chris Rodriguez, missing a couple OTA weeks with an undisclosed issue. That's the kind of uncertainty people often overreact to. If the expectation is still a return by camp, it's a bench stash question, not a red alert question. Kyle Pitts is the deeper lesson. A cheap price can look appealing, but if the player has years of durability concerns and multiple seasons spent playing hurt, the ADP is not automatically value. Sometimes cheap is just accurate compensation for unresolved downside. Receiver ADP moves often tell you as much about situation theory as about talent. A.J. Brown getting trade rumor steam toward New England and rising about 7 spots makes sense on paper because the Patriots project as a better passing environment by pass rate over expectation, and because money signals roll, 33 million guaranteed usually means planned volume. Still, rumor-based ADP gains are fragile. Until the destination and usage are real, drafters are pricing a scenario, not a fact. Christian Watson is more grounded because there is both contract commitment and efficiency evidence. The extension says the team wants him involved. A 19% target share in his 10 games says he wasn't just surviving on trick plays, and yards per out run helps separate real explosiveness from random long touchdowns. Watson ranking 16th all-time in that metric since entering the league is meaningful because those leaderboards are usually crowded with stars. It suggests the big play ability is not fake. The open question is whether he can scale that efficiency into steady fantasy volume without the usual injury interruptions. Jordan Addison is a cleaner example of how quarterback context can bottleneck a player. Efficient per-target production and touchdown ability are nice, but if the passing environment stays shaky, the ceiling stays capped. If the quarterback play improves, the low-end WR3 case gets much easier to believe. Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson are fascinating because their career resumes are close enough to invite strong opinions, yet not strong enough to settle anything. Similar yardage, similar touchdown range, similar draft pedigree, and still no unmistakable takeoff season. That means the debate about their long-term ceiling is still mostly about projection style. If you prioritize route talent and volume durability, you can stay optimistic. If you want proof of a true fantasy jump, the evidence is still incomplete. Emeka Egbuka's early production puts him in a legitimately rare historical bucket, and doing it from the slot next to Mike Evans makes the start more impressive, not less. Add in a new coordinator, promising more motion and involvement, and there is a real role growth story there. Ladd McConkey feels like a classic market hesitation case. The efficiency was elite, the playoff eruption showed the upside on a big stage, and yet recurring injury concern seems to keep the price from fully catching up. That discount can be rational, but at some point repeated efficiency becomes more than a small sample curiosity. Colston Loveland's late-season run was outrageous by rookie tight end standards, and it absolutely deserves attention. Nearly 600 yards over 10 games and 16 fantasy points per game is not the kind of stretch you ignore. The pushback is also fair. Matchups matter, and short samples can distort what is sustainable. If part of the spike came against weak opponents, then projecting that pace over a full season is probably too aggressive. So the balanced takeaway is that the breakout signal looks real, but the exact ceiling is still uncertain. That's different from saying it was a fluke. Kyle Pitts sits on the opposite side of the same argument. You can build a believable bullish case around role changes, slot usage, and triple-digit targets. But the injury history and shifting quarterback and coordinator environments mean the floor remains lower than the ADP discount alone suggests. Breece Hall versus Kenneth Walker is really a question about what kind of running back insulation you trust. Hall's receiving profile is stronger, and catches travel well across game scripts. Walker's appeal is more tied to red zone work and scoring environment. If Walker really lands the high-value touches in a strong Chiefs offense, the fantasy math works. But if pass protection and route limitations trim his snaps, then the projection gets fragile very quickly. Goal line optimism is useful, but it needs playing time security underneath it. RJ Harvey is more interesting than his ADP suggests. The passing game work and touchdown production are already on the page, and when a player falls mostly because of blocking concerns and depth chart anxiety, there can be value if the team still trusts him near the goal line. Jackson Dart fits the same broader lesson as the cheaper rushing quarterbacks. Rushing touchdown specialists can beat their passing profile for fantasy purposes. The danger is assuming those touchdowns are sticky year to year when usage near the goal line can swing. On format, the snake versus auction comparison is actually useful. Snake is easier to enter and easier to manage casually. Auction gives sharper managers more ways to express convictions and usually prices scarcity more honestly. In a superflex world, that matters even more because quarterback value warps the whole room. One of the more charming side notes here is the show's quarterback archetype game, the categories like future used car dealership owner or ignores you at a party. It's silly, but it also works because it gets people to reveal how they intuitively sort players. And yes, having Steven Spielberg hang around for more than 2 hours, talking movies, props, and bit segments is the kind of guest flex that tells you this podcast universe has a lot of range. The recurring theme is simple. ADP is a useful map, but it's a bad substitute for asking why the market moved. If the evidence is role, efficiency, and format leverage, that's different from rumour, medical wishcasting, or panic. That's it for Podkey PPR. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.